Andy and I got involved in the Liberal Party in 1979. Both our dads had been involved in the Liberal Party for a long time, so it was kind of natural that it happened. Andy's dad invited us to a Fredericton North Liberal Association meeting, and we went and never looked back.
Andy Scott and I have known each other since 1978 when we first met. I was at law school and he was studying sociology, so we came from different worlds. He was from Barker's Point, I was from St. John.
My name is Pat O'Brien. I'm friends with Andy Scott for 35 years. I met Andy at university. I was a lone St. Thomas student, and he and all my other friends were in UNB. Andy and I were both doing bachelor's degrees in sociology. I think it was taking him longer than it was me, but so our years converged, and we just became good friends with that link in sociology, and then the politics came into it.
I've known Andy since we were in university together, back at UNB in 1979. A group of us would get together regularly and hang out. You know, between classes, we'd play cards in the sub, for example, and talk politics. And of course, Andy was the resident philosopher at the time.
Well, I've known Andy Scott ever since, I would say, the 1970s. I was actively involved in the Young Liberals at the law school at the time, and he was involved in the provincial Young Liberals. And
it was around the time at university that Andy was very much involved, as was Lenny, his good friend, in the Young Liberals, or the reshaping of the Young Liberal Party, and we were all within that age bracket. And Andy just naturally brought an enthusiasm that's contagious. And the group that was around the table, so to speak, at the Student Union building just started to gravitate not only to Andy, but to his ideas around how Young Liberals should organize and what the Liberal Party stood for.
I think his spark came from his sense of engagement. He's willing to serve the people. And from what I understand, Andy took a lot of these great qualities from his parents and his family.
So Andy was always enlightening us on the Liberal Party and Liberal philosophy, and in the midst of other activities that were going on. And so you formed a natural attachment to the party through Andy's enthusiasm. His
contributions are extraordinary, and he really represented a lifeblood for the Liberal Party at a time when it was very sick. We were out of office 17 years, and the party went through numerous leadership changes. And one of the constants was Andy Scott and the Young Liberals, and they became an energizing force in the party, and really ended up giving us a vitality and a freshness at a time when we desperately needed it.
He did want to make politics fun. As he got more involved, of course, it became more of a profession for him. He had to work harder at it, but he always made it fun for the guys around him.
He wanted to revolutionize the way the fundraising was done. As with most parties at the time, they all depended on the big donation. Andy thought it would be much better to get a lot of people involved giving smaller amounts of money. Again, getting more commitment to the party. And similarly with the membership, just made it easier to become members of the New Brunswick Liberal Association. And prior to the '87 election, he was instrumental in growing the party membership to 100,000 members.
He gave what I would call the organizational skeleton to the Liberal Party of New Brunswick. The riding associations, the way in which we've organized them, our fundraising, and our membership. We had a membership list of over 100,000 members, bigger than the National Liberal Party in Canada, and one of the largest in all across the country. We were fundraising from over 100,000 people. We were reaching out to people at the grassroots level before Barack Obama ever got into public life. So this was all being done 20 years early in the Liberal Party of New Brunswick, way before it became a trend-setting way of operating in the United States and other places around the world. This was all Andy Scott and his leadership.
Moi, personnellement, j'ai travaillé avec Andy de plus près à partir du congrès au leadership du Premier ministre McKenna en 1985. Et à ce moment-là, le parti, comme on le sait, était dans une position assez difficile. Et Andy, c'est là que je l'ai vraiment apprécié comme bâtisseur, comme organisateur, mais toujours dans le respect des gens. Ça a toujours été ça, une caractéristique fondamentale de Andy, étant capable de vendre ses idées sans les imposer et d'amener les gens à travailler avec lui.
He was very sincere, and that's why people liked him, and that's why people attracted to him. He didn't try to put on any airs, or he was always the same if you saw him at the market or you saw him over at his house on a Friday night or you were out at a political campaign. He was a hard worker, he did his job, and he really had fun doing it. He loved his job.
Andy was a great people person, and he recognized the importance of volunteers, and that's certainly what served him well in the party. I mean, everybody throughout the province loved Andy because every volunteer was important.
Oui, c'était fort impressionnant parce que Andy semblait toujours pouvoir rallier plein de jeunes, puis nous surpassait toujours.
Well, I think that Andy saw through involvement in the political party, and especially the Liberal Party, a means of achieving what he wanted for this province.
He was an organizer here at the party office, and then I got to know him better when after the election he became a member of McKenna's office, did a lot of work for Frank. And then I got to know him even a lot better than that when he became a federal member of parliament.
Andy Scott really had a common touch with people. He understood the issues of poverty, of literacy, of gender equality. Those were things that he celebrated and pushed very hard and worked on. And those were things that many of us in the Liberal Party learned from Andy.
Je pense que Andy, c'est quelqu'un qui était beaucoup concentré sur les politiques. Alors même si des personnes ne voulaient pas voter pour le Parti libéral ou ils allaient puis voter pour Andy, c'était évident, c'était en raison du fait que c'était concentré sur avoir des bonnes idées qui étaient basées sur des faits et basées sur des statistiques.
He was at the forefront of every major point of conflict that I've ever seen in this province because that's where he was most effective. We had significant language issues at a period in our history and created a program called Dialogue New Brunswick. Andy was the person who was the force behind that. We had a very substantial challenge in terms of the literacy levels of our citizens, and Andy took on that responsibility of organizing literacy at the grassroots level, created a program that became so extraordinarily successful that it received a United Nations prize, the CAST program. When we had challenges with our disabled community, Andy Scott became the leader of outreach in terms of making that population more inclusive. Aboriginal community and the challenges that the Aboriginal community faced saw Andy Scott as their champion, and he's revered amongst Aboriginals all across the country. So whatever the problem, Andy was there.
With the file that Prime Minister Martin gave him, and with the challenges that we're facing First Nations communities across Canada, I can't think of a single person who was better to appoint in that ministry at that particular time.
Andy took that on because he understood that the absolutely crucial thing that had to be done was no more unilateralism, no more simply imposing on the First Nations, the Métis Nation, or the Inuit, our views. And so while we said it at the first meeting, it was Andy who ran the 18 months of negotiation. And the message that went out from Andy all the time was, we're here to listen. You tell us what the problems are. And they did. They told healthcare, education, accountability, clean water, housing, economic development. Those were their issues. And that's Andy Scott made them their issues. And then he said, now let's deal with the solutions. And we'll talk about those solutions, and we'll negotiate over those solutions. And we'll give you all the time that you need to go back to your people to consult. This had never been done before in history. That was Andy Scott who brought that to the table.
It became very well known very, very quickly that Andy had a set of special skills. He was a conciliator. He was someone that enjoyed consultation. He was someone that actually really enjoyed sitting down with people and discussing very difficult issues.
I think one of the foundations of Andy's success was, one, he truly cared about people, but he managed to find ways to get them engaged in the process. And I think it's important that we find a way to similarly engage people in the political process, the community, and the province in general.
I mean, we always say the Liberal Party is a big tent and where everybody's welcome. Well, Andy did just that. He really showed us what it is to do politics differently.
I think he would want to tell the Liberal Party, continue to be a big tent, continue to be open to new ideas, continue to be a dynamic, progressive force. There is such a thing as a radical center, and Andy always found that radical center. There was nobody better at reconciling differences than Andy Scott.
If you could make the perfect politician, I really think that you would come up with Andy Scott. He was someone that was genuine, he was someone who was sincere, he was someone that could have a good conversation with absolutely anyone, whether it be sitting in Parliament or whether it be at the market in Fredericton. He was somebody that was very policy oriented. He understood the big issues. He understood that we needed evidence-based policies. And on top of that, a little known fact that he played a huge role in organizing for the party as well. So you put someone who's just a genuinely good, sincere person who has that capability of really thinking high level and coming up with good, strong social justice policies, and someone who was able to politically organize, well, you literally have the perfect politician.
I think that Andy Scott is a very significant person in the history of this country, and I think that's what will be written up. But if you were to say to me, what do I think about Andy Scott? Andy Scott was my friend. I loved to sit down, we'd chat, talk, we'd argue. He's a lot of fun, and we're all going to miss him greatly.